In the hushed hollows of Adams, Tennessee, from 1817 to 1821, a nightmare unfolded. A family, the Bells, found themselves trapped in a maelstrom of terror, besieged by a force they could neither comprehend nor escape. This was the Bell Witch, a name that echoes through folklore, synonymous with inexplicable horror. But what if the chilling tales we know are merely a veil? What if the true darkness was not just a spirit unbound, but something far more insidious, born of human malevolence? What if the witch was merely a tool, forged by a soul twisted by obsession? The Bell family lived a life rooted in the simple rhythms of the 19th century frontier. John Bell, patriarch and farmer, was a man of stern integrity, his reputation solid as the Tennessee earth he tilled. Lucy, his wife, a beacon of gentle kindness. Their children, Joan Jr., Drew, Richard, and the spirited young Betsy, were the picture of innocence. Their futures stretching bright before them. Their cabin, just beyond Adams, was a sanctuary of peace. Not until it wasn't. It began with the scratching. A faint rasp, like skeletal fingers dragging across rough wood, came first from outside their cabin after dark. They dismissed it. A raccoon, perhaps, or branches scraping against the eaves. But the sounds grew, evolving into furious, relentless clawing, seemingly from within the very walls. The air itself began to feel heavy, electric. It was as if something was desperate to escape, or, more terrifyingly, to reveal its presence. And then, the voice. At first, an almost imperceptible murmur, a whisper so frail it could be mistaken for the wind sighing through the pines. But soon, the words materialized, distinct and chilling. The voice, now undeniably real, called out to John Bell, singling him out, mocking him with an eerie, intimate familiarity that suggested deep-seated malice. John, a man unaccustomed to fear, initially brushed it off as an auditory hallucination, a trick of a tired mind. But as the relentless days bled into sleepless nights, the voice grew stronger, bolder, a cruel presence that filled the very space he breathed. John Bell, once a pillar of strength, began to visibly waste away. An insidious weakness gnawed at him, as if an unseen parasite was draining his vital essence, bit by agonizing bit. His eyes sank into hollows, his robust complexion faded to a sickly gray, and his once commanding stride became a slow, painful shuffle. His very spirit seemed to dim. The voice, now known to the family as Kate, became an incessant tormentor. It taunted him with the promise of death, whispered threats into his ear at all hours, followed him like a malevolent shadow. He'd hear it on the dusty roads across the vast open fields, even within the quiet confines of his barn, always just beyond sight, yet impossibly, suffocatingly close. The phenomena soon spread its tendrils beyond John, infecting the entire household. Lucy, his wife, began hearing the insidious whispers. The children, too, became targets of increasingly bizarre and frightening occurrences. But it was young Betsy, with her innocent spirit, who bore the brunt of the entity's escalating fury. She would bolt awake in the dead of night, paralyzed by the rhythmic thump-thump on her walls, or the suffocating pressure of an invisible weight pressing down on her chest, stealing her breath in ragged gasps. She would awaken to agonizing pinches, slaps that left angry red marks on her skin, and unseen hands yanking her hair or dragging her from her bed. The unseen activity became a constant symphony of dread. Furniture would shift with a groan, as if protesting an unseen occupant. One evening as Lucy cooked, a heavy wooden chair exploded across the kitchen, crashing against the far wall with splintering force, leaving a gaping silence in its wake. Then came the unequivocal, brutal, physical assaults. John Bell had barely stepped back into the cabin from the fields, when an invisible force slammed into his back. He was hurled to the ground with a sickening crack that echoed through the silent house. No marks, no assailant, only agonizing pain that radiated through his spine. But this was not an isolated incident. It was a promise of worse to come. Over the ensuing days, John and his children were battered by unseen blows. Slaps, kicks, and savage punches rained down from the empty air. Lucy, tears streaming down her face, could only watch, helpless, as her family endured this invisible torture. They were caged by an enemy they couldn't fight, their lives a living nightmare. Desperate, the Bells finally reached out to their community, their secret agony now public whispers. A local preacher, James Johnson, arrived, brimming with the typical skepticism of a man of logic and faith. He'd dismissed the rumors as mere superstition. But within a single day, the entity began to unravel his disbelief. He witnessed a door slam shut with unnatural violence. He heard the voice, now a cackling personal taunt, call his name, dissecting his own private thoughts with chilling accuracy. And on the third night, Johnson himself was struck by invisible blows. A flurry of impacts that sent him reeling, propelled from the house in abject terror. He never returned, his faith in the tangible world irrevocably shaken. Despite the escalating terror, the Bells refused to abandon their home, bound by their land and their very identity. But what was this entity? A wrathful ghost? A demonic presence? Or was it something far more intimately horrifying? The answer arrived at one bleak evening, not in a supernatural manifestation, but in the unsettling form of a human visitor. Richard Powell, the local school teacher. Powell was a man of quiet demeanor, unassuming, almost forgettable, save for an unsettling intensity that flickered in his eyes, particularly when they rested upon Betsy Bell. He possessed a secret history with Betsy, a past steeped in dark obsession and bitter, unrequited desire. Powell had harbored a consuming, possessive love for Betsy since her childhood, a love that warped into something monstrous as she matured. When she, with gentle kindness, refused his persistent advances and chose another suitor, Joshua Gardner, Powell's soul curdled, consumed by a venomous cocktail of jealousy, rage, and a profound sense of injustice. It is said that Richard Powell sought a power beyond the natural world. He struck a bargain, a pact with forces, ancient and malevolent, to gain what he believed was rightfully his. Betsy's undivided attention, her love, her very life, no matter the cost. The Bell Witch was no mere random spirit. It was the hideous manifestation of Richard Powell's twisted obsession. A malevolent entity meticulously summoned and cultivated through an unholy whispered bargain. Richard Powell's chilling confession, delivered with a detached calm that was far more disturbing than any rage, shattered the Bell family's world. But there was a darker layer to this nightmare. The Bell Witch, the entity he had awakened, was something far older, far more powerful than Powell could ever have imagined. Powell hadn't just summoned a tool. It opened a gate, unleashing something vast and insatiable that had merely been awaiting a vessel. As the haunting reached its crescendo, Powell's initial role as puppet master began to unravel. He had meticulously directed the spirit, using its immense power to torment the Bell family, focusing its malice particularly on Betsy. The more they suffered, the more their fear, anger, and pain festered, the stronger and more autonomous the Bell Witch became. It was a true parasite, gorging itself on their despair, bloating into a force so gargantuan, so utterly malevolent that even Richard Powell, its orchestrator, began to lose all semblance of control. He had inadvertently conjured a serpent, and it no longer recognized its charmer. In a desperate final act, the Bell family, joined by a handful of the bravest townspeople, gathered for a ritual. It was a last futile attempt to confront and banish the monstrous entity that had consumed their lives. But when they tried to call it forth, to bind it with words of power and faith, something went catastrophically, unthinkably wrong. The spirit manifested in its full, horrifying glory not as a ghost, but as an indistinct, churning vortex of pure, swirling darkness that seemed to suck the very light from the air. The temperature plummeted, a bone-chilling cold that seemed to invade their very marrow, and the ground beneath their feet began to tremble as if in agony. The entity's laughter was not a sound, but a multi-layered cacophony of agony and malice, 1,000 tortured whispers that rattled teeth and froze blood in veins, mocking their feeble, desperate defiance. The Bell Witch did not merely vanish. It tore through the ritual, ripping apart the fragile bonds they had attempted to forge, scattering their hope like dust. But it wasn't finished. The entity's voice, now a deafening chorus of shrieks, in vows promised its return, a chilling prophecy to descend upon them when they least expected it. And with one final ear-splitting, spine-chilling declaration, "I'll be back," it dissipated back into the suffocating shadows, leaving behind only a terrifying, echoing silence and the pervasive stench of ozone and dread. John Bell died under circumstances that defy all medical explanation. His body, found without a single mark of physical injury, emanated a strange, sickly sweet odor of decay, a scent not of natural death, but of something utterly unnatural, something that had devoured him from within. Betsy Bell, her spirit irrevocably fractured by the relentless torment and the shocking truth of its origin, vanished from Adams. Her fate became mere whispered rumor, swallowed by speculation, a living ghost even before her departure. The Bell family's name would forever be scarred by the terror they had endured, a chilling stain on the very fabric of their history. Though the active torment of the Bell Witch ceased, its malevolent presence never truly vanished. The land around Adams, Tennessee, became imbued with its lingering curse. Generations afterward, residents and visitors alike reported unsettling phenomena, whispers carried on the wind when no one was near, fleeting shadows dancing in the deepest parts of the woods, and ghostly voices that echoed through the long, moonless nights. The air often felt heavy, charged with an invisible unease. To this day, the legend of the Bell Witch persists, chilling all who dare to speak its name. Is it merely a phantom, a spirit haunting the historical records, or something far more sinister? Whatever the truth, one thing remains terrifyingly certain. The Bell Witch was born from a twisted pact. From the darkest recesses of human obsession, and its terrifying legacy, forever linked to the shadowed ambition of a man named Powell, lives on. In Adams, Tennessee, the Bell Witch still waits, lurking in the shadows, feeding on fear, biding its time, forever ready for its chilling return.